I'm a brain scientist, and as a brain scientist, I'm actually interested in how the brain learns. And I'm especially interested in the possibility of making our brains smarter, better, and faster. This is in this context I'm going to tell you about video games. When we say video game, most of you think about children. It's true, 90% of children do play video games. But let's be frank. When the kids are in bed, who is in front of the PlayStation? Most of you. The average age of a gamer is 33 years old, not 8 years old. And in fact, if we look at the projected demographics of video game play, the video game players of tomorrow are older adults. So video games is pervasive throughout our society. It is clearly here to stay. It has an amazing impact on our everyday life. Consider these statistics released by Activision. After 1 month of release of the game Call of Duty Black Ops, it had been played for 68,000 years worldwide, right? Would any of you complain if this was a case about doing linear algebra? So what we're asking in the lab is how can we leverage that power? Now I want to step back a bit. I know most of you have had the experience of coming back home and finding your kids playing these kind of games. The name of the game is to get after your enemy, zombie, bad guys before they get to you, right? And I'm almost sure most of you have thought, oh, come on, can't you do something more intelligent than shooting at zombies? I'd like you to put this kind of knee-jerk reaction in the context of what you would have thought if you had found your girl playing Sudoku or your boy reading Shakespeare, right? Most parents would find that great. Well, I'm not going to tell you that playing video games days in and days out is actually good for your health. It's not, and binging is never good. But I'm going to argue that in reasonable doses, actually the very game I showed you at the beginning, those action-packed shooter games, have quite powerful effects and positive effects on many different aspects of our behavior. There's not 1 week that goes without some major headlines in the media about whether video games are good or bad for you, right? You're all bombarded with that. I'd like to put this kind of Friday night bar discussion aside and get you to actually step into the lab. What we do in the lab is actually measure directly, in a quantitative fashion, what is the impact of video games. You all know about multitasking. You all have been faulty of multitasking. When you're driving and you pick up your cell phone, bad idea, very bad idea. Why? Because as your attention shifts to your cell phone, you are actually losing the capacity to react swiftly to the car braking in front of you, and so you're much more likely to get engaged into a car accident. Now, we can measure that kind of skills in the lab. We obviously don't ask people to drive around and see how many car accidents they have. That would be a little costly proposition. But we design tasks on the computer where we can measure to the millisecond accuracy how good they are at switching from one task to another. When we do that, we actually find that people that play a lot of action games are really, really good. They switch really fast, very swiftly. They pay a very small cost. Now, I'd like you to remember that result and put it in the context of another group of technology users, a group which is actually much revered by society, which are people that engage in multimedia tasking. What is multimedia tasking? It's the fact that most of us, most of our children, are engaged into listening to music at the same time as they're doing search on the web, at the same time as they're chatting on Facebook with their friends. That's a multimedia tasker. Now, in a sense, when we think about the effect of video games on the brain, it's very similar to the effect of wine on health. There are some very poor use of wine. There are some very poor use of video games. But when consumed in reasonable doses and at the right age, wine can be very good for health. There are actually specific molecules that have been identified in red wine as leading to greater life expectancy. So it's the same way, like those action video games have a number of ingredients that are actually really powerful for brain plasticity, learning, attention, vision, etc. And so we need, and we're working on understanding what are those active ingredients so that we can really then leverage them to deliver better games either for education or for rehabilitation of patients. Now, because we're interested in having an impact for education or rehabilitation of patients, we're actually not that interested in how those of you that choose to play video games for many hours on hand perform. I'm much more interested in taking any of you and showing that by forcing you to play an action game, I can actually change your vision for the better. Whether you want to play that action game or not, right? That's a point of rehabilitation or education. Most of the kids don't go to school saying, great, 2 hours of math. So that's really the crux of the research. And to do that, we need to go one more step. The one more step is to do training studies. So let me illustrate that step with a task which is called mental rotation. Mental rotation is a task where I'm going to ask you, and again, you're going to do the task, to look at this shape, study it. It's a target shape. And I'm going to present you 4 different shapes. One of these 4 different shapes is actually a rotated version of this shape. I want you to tell me which one. The first one, second one, third one, or fourth one? Okay, I'll help you. Fourth one. One more. Get those brains working, come on. That's our target shape. Third, good. This is hard, right? Like the reason I asked you to do that is because you really feel your brain cringing, right? It doesn't really feel like playing a mindless action video games. Well, what we do in these training studies is people come to the lab, they do tasks like this one. We then force them to play 10 hours of action games. They don't play 10 hours of action game in a row. They do distributed practice, so little shots of 40 minutes, several days over a period of 2 weeks. Then once they're done with their training, they come back a few days later, and they're tested again on a similar type of mental rotation task. So this is work from a colleague in Toronto. What they showed is that initially, subjects perform where they're expected to perform given their age. After 2 weeks of training on action video games, they actually perform better. And the improvement is still there 5 months after having done the training. That's really, really important. Why? Because I told you, we want to use these games for education or for rehabilitation. We need to have effects that are going to be long-lasting. Now, at this point, a number of you are probably wondering, well, what are you waiting for putting on the market a game that would be good for the attention of my grandmother and that she would actually enjoy, or a game that would be great to rehabilitate the vision of my grandson who has amblyopia, for example? Well, we're working on it, but here is a challenge. There are brain scientists like me that are beginning to understand what are the good ingredients in games to promote positive effects. That's what I'm going to call the broccoli side of the equation. There is an entertainment software industry which is extremely deft at coming up with appealing products that you can't resist. That's the chocolate side of the equation. The issue is we need to put the two together, and it's a little bit like with food. Who really wants to eat chocolate-covered broccoli? None of you. And you probably have had that feeling, right? Picking up an education game and sort of feeling, it's not really fun, it's not really engaging. So what we need is really a new brand of chocolate. A brand of chocolate that is irresistible, that you really want to play, but that has all the ingredients, the good ingredients that are extracted from the broccoli that you can't recognize, but are still working on your brains. And we're working on it, but it takes to come and to get together brain scientists, people that work in the entertainment software industry, and publishers. So these are not people that you usually meet every day, but it's actually doable, and we are on the right track. I'd like to leave you with that thought, and thank you for your attention.